We're ready. Great. Thank you. Good evening, Ms. Swarthmore and other members of the committee. If you are ready, we can call the meeting to order. Please do. Okay, thank you very much. Calling the meeting to order and welcome everyone to the March 13th meeting of the Policy Committee. Happy to have everyone here tonight, and we'd like to just do our roll call. So Ms. Swarthmore, here. Mr. Lay, here. Ms. Williams, here. Ms. Rinsett, not here. Thank you. Okay, very good. Committee should have received meeting minutes from our February meeting, and we need a motion to approve those minutes. So moved. Okay, very good. And second. Thank you. Put those motions to rest. Moving into our policies from last month, that would be second readings this month. We'll start with policy 200, which is enrollment of students and the accompanying AR. Last revised actually only in May, but we will turn it over to Mr. Diazio, who is joining us virtually.
Yes, good evening. Do you need me to do anything in terms of sharing my screen, or are the policies up online? What would be
the screen?
What's that?
You will be sharing the screen.
Okay, all right. So I just need the host to enable the screen share, and then I'll be able to do that. Okay, let's see. All right, so can you see policy 200 now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this policy 200 we had just edited in a minor way because one of the later items that we'll discuss, the military enrollment policy, there needed to be some minor updates to 200, and the same is true for 202 when we get there next, just to acknowledge the adoption of the new policy regarding enrollment of military children. But there's been no other changes since the last meeting.
Anybody have any questions or comments? No. Okay. If you not, you move that one forward then to the board meeting.
Thank you. And nothing on the accompanying AR either.
Oh, great, thank you. I did.
Okay, great. Okay. Moving on to policy 202.
Yep, and same thing here, just essentially some minor edits to recognize the military enrollment policy.
Any questions?
No.
Looks good as well.
Great, thank you. We'll move that forward to the board as well. And then policy 216.1, supplemental discipline records and the AR.
Yes, so this, we took the existing policy that you'll see here, and we are getting rid of this version of the policy. And there's a new policy, a shorter policy with a much more detailed administrative regulation. There's no changes to this policy or the AR since the last meeting. I think we had a good discussion last month about this policy, and essentially the basis for this policy, the reason it was brought under review was because there are new state regulations that have come out regarding information that the school is to receive from the juvenile probation office when students commit certain offenses, where schools need to be made aware before the student returns to school. The AR just largely tracks the law.
And do we have any questions or comments on that? About the policy or the AR? No, I don't.
And then our last second reading policy is policy 254, and it's accompanying AR as well.
And that's the new policy that tracks the new law or amendment to the school code regarding the enrollment of military children and as I noted, the law or the policy just essentially tracks what the law requires to give some flexibility in terms of enrollment requirements, and then also has some provisions in there to make sure that once enrolled, those students are receiving support they may need, whether it be in the form of helping identify courses that they'll need to take, or counseling services, or assistance with coming up with a graduation plan to graduate on time, those types of things, just to make sure that those students don't fall behind in the event that they are moving around from one place to another due to active duty military service.
Any questions or comments on this, on the policy or the AR? No.
Excellent, thank you. Now would be the time that we would accept any public comments. Unfortunately, no one is here to join us tonight. So, we can move on to our first reading policies. So first one on the agenda for this evening is policy 101, statement which was last updated in October of 2014.
Sure. And I'll preface this by saying that the new agenda items for this evening are fairly light. There's not many items on the agenda. Dr. Marseille and we met, and Dina and I met, and there are a number of policies that you'll be seeing in April and May that are being worked on. I know that there's a number of policies in facilities, in the Office of Education, that are being worked on. So you will see in the next two meetings, you'll see more substantive policies. I saw that Dr. Conley set out an aggressive agenda for his team to be working on a number of items. So again, stay tuned in the next 2 months for some more substantive items, but we're going to be diving into the 100 and 200 series, the education related policies. Those are the ones that are probably going to be most crucial and central to your strategic plan goals. But we figured that a good way to start diving into that work is to look at some of the high level policies in the 100 series and get them right. And that will help get the team internally thinking about doing this work. So we're starting with the mission statement and the academic standards. That's policy 101 and 102. And then we talked about identifying some policies that you'll see in a moment that we don't think we need on the books anymore. And in terms of getting through, 6, 7, 8 policies every meeting, sometimes the easy ones to take care of are the ones we can actually just repeal. So as we start with 101, this is simply the mission statement. This comes from the mission statement is on the district's website, but the mission statement that was in policy did not match that. So we just, we changed that. So what you're seeing is the mission statement as it is reflected on the district's website.
And I do remember that was one of our audit findings, if I'm remembering correctly, from the communications audit. I did not have any questions on that one. Any other questions?
Yeah, that was the answer. I was wondering.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. As I was looking through the mission statement, one of the things that I'm afraid we may see this again is because A, we wrote a vision for impact statement. B, one of the outcomes for our strategic plan deliverables was June of 2024, we would have presented the board an equity statement. We would not be ready to do that. So we're going to have to push that till next fall to start that work without trying to rush something in the next couple of months because obviously things occurred that had to shift around agendas and times. So one of the things I'm thinking about is that though I don't have any major objections to the document, I think that I anticipate once we do an equity statement, we're going to have to come back to this. I say that because when we looked at what's missing, what I believe to be missing in the mission statement is something that speaks to equity. So for me, I wrote it as the Wallingford-Swarthmore District is committed to ensuring the academic achievement and personal growth of all students within the environment that promotes respect, excellence, leadership, engagement, and equity. And then, if we were gonna either leave it like that as one sentence versus the bullets, or we add another bullet and say, respect for self and others, active engagement and learning, leadership in the global community, the pursuit of excellence, and then another bullet, the new bullet, equitable opportunities. So I thought it would be deserving my recommendation to think about this work and how our particular words embedded in our mission statement that speaks to the district's commitment to ensuring equitable opportunities for all students, because it is embedded in each of the four pathways to some extent, but even the fifth pathway that talks about making sure that there's appropriate resources that meet the needs of diverse learners from the physical perspective, right? So that's equitable access. The same way we're talking about King Field and helping to create things like that. The other way we're talking about other parts of the building that we're trying to accommodate to make sure that everyone has equitable access and equitable opportunities. So I wrote equitable opportunities / access as something I'd like the committee to consider adding, but I do believe that once we have the equity statement, which then will lead to the equity policy, we might have to come back and look at, does this mission align with some of the statements and some of the words that we use?
I have a comment about this one, because I thought too that the strategic plan has a mission statement. And this doesn't seem to reflect on what the mission statement says in the strategic plan. So I was thinking of just maybe taking a few words out of the mission statement of the strategic plan, but have that as the policy, because then it's cohesive.
I agree with you. Yeah.
You know, because there's already a mission statement on the
It's a
strategic
vision
plan.
statement, so they are a little bit different, but I don't disagree with the, because it takes what you're saying, incorporates more of what you're suggesting. I think the one that's jumping out at me actually is at the very end, that our schools, we expect them to be welcoming, inclusive, and accessible to all. Because I don't know how people feel about even, is equity and inclusivity always the same thing? Or can they be different? And
certain words trigger.
Yeah.
And bring certain images to certain folks. Inclusion, in my experience, is less likely to raise dissonance amongst individuals who are more likely to push back and forth around, well, what are you talking about equity? Versus, we're gonna make sure everyone feels welcome and included.
included is not.
Right, in terms of that process. Yeah, so Ms. Whitford, I agree with you.
Yeah.
You're one step ahead of me, because I was thinking from the vision piece, how do we incorporate some words because we do have a vision statement. And I thought maybe some of those words would be better connected inside that vision statement as well, but it doesn't mean that some of those words can't be in the mission statement. But I was waiting for, since this was a vision for impact and visions about long-term thinking, and mission is about your core values, that we could find a way to incorporate some of that in the vision. But to your point, Ms. Fritz, there's nothing wrong with trying to see if a couple of those words could go into the mission statement.
All right, let's try it. The equity is interesting. We use the word equity.
And we can either try to incorporate those words now, or if the committee wants to task, administration and myself to try to marry the two documents in advance of next month. This can be a quick policy once we come up with language that we want. There's no urgency to getting this one to a first reading, if we think that it should be slowed down. But I'm open to either approach, whatever the committee would like.
And to your point, Ms. Walkman, I like, when I didn't notice this, even though I had it, you always have it, you always have it.
Somebody does.
So, yeah, it's always been.
We're a heathen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was thinking, people want to put that in there.
Simply, our schools are a haven, one that is reflective of our community values, that is a cornerstone of our neighborhoods, and that is welcoming, inclusive, and accessible to all.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to figure out to what ways could we embed that or tenets of that in this particular statement as well. And maybe that inclusion piece works well here versus the equitable opportunity, even though pathway 2 and 3, we're very specific around, we use the term equity and inclusion and belonging in those pathways. So we name all 3.
To that point, just to give some decent guidance here as, because I do like the idea of just giving some general guidance that you guys could work on, but so equity, inclusivity, belonging, because the other thing that's jumping out at me in the statement, the vision statement, is that, feeling supported. We're creating an environment which our students are supported and valued. And that sense of belonging that goes with that, and I feel like there's something in that one that is really important also to capture. Yeah.
And then the other one is the diverse perspectives, approaches, cultures, and thoughts in all they do.
Yeah, now
That's sort of touching on what you're.
the hard part about a mission statement, it is extremely concise.
Yes.
It is 3 to 4 sentences.
Elevator. pitch,
If-
yeah.
And that's pushing it in terms of that process,
Yeah.
right? So most mission statements really read one long core sentence that people can roll off the top of, off their tongue. So in an attempt to, which is why we were talking about this earlier, how mission statements can take a year
Mhm,
and some change to unpack.
mhm.
If you thought the 17 versions of the Vision for Impact, you know what a mission statement does. That's like, to the 18th power.
Yes.
But yeah, so I do think if part of that is allowing administration to say, what ways could you try to find, a sentence or a couple of sentences that kind of begins to marry some of the themes within the Vision for Impact.
So send
and
it back
this.
to you guys
Yeah.
too.
And I think a lot of the fodder for the work, I mean, I've done mission statement work, it's in here.
Yeah.
I think there's
Yeah.
a lot of good work here. It would just be, we have to really make it concise. That's
Yeah.
the key. But we'll keep that
Yeah.
last sentence, Ms. Wood said, so I love that.
I
last
do
sentence.
too. It's a good-
Yeah.
it's a great thing. All right.
Okay, so we'll bring this one back next month in a revised form.
Yep.
I think that was good feedback. Are we ready to go on to 102?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So 102, I don't believe 102 hadn't been looked at. It was one of the policies from, that was approaching 10 years. But it was actually okay. The content was okay. We did add one sentence here about the district providing assistance to students who are having difficulty attaining the academic standards, just to add a level of support to this policy. But the actual content areas that are in the code are still the same. So very few changes to this one, but it was good to take a look at it.
Just I guess sort of a comment, this one seems so broad to me, and it almost feels like a check the box kind of thing. I mean, is it, especially since it hasn't been revised in 10 years and it's still holding true, it just seems kind of, I mean, what is the purpose of the policy? Is it?
Really just to set forth the content areas that are the content areas that are important or that you know, you have academic standards in order to obtain proficiency in the content areas that are listed. And those items that are listed 1 through 10 here are called out in the Pennsylvania State Board of Education regulations. So I think it really is more of just a compliance, check the box type policy. And I think you would see if you looked at 10 different school districts, policy 102 on academic standards, you'd probably see identical language in those policies. It's sort of these first couple policies in the 100 section are just very, very high level, not a whole lot of content to them. And they kind of set the stage for the policies that then follow around resource materials, adoption of textbooks, adoption of curriculum, assessing student progress, reporting student progress. And then you get into all of the different, ways in which instruction is delivered, traditional classroom setting, career and technical education centers, gifted education, special education, homebound instruction, all of those things we're going to see later on in the 100 series. So this is just the prelude chapter to the book, preamble.
Could it read, assessing and expanding academic standards to challenge students to achieve their highest not highest.
Full potential?
The
Full
full potential, I want to say, like,
Yeah, we could, I mean, that language can be modified.
Yeah, but I don't know, full potential is measurable. So the academic standards is the measure. That's the key performance indicators to say that students are going to meet those academic standards and demonstrate their understanding of those standards. Now, different students have different modes in which they would demonstrate that. So potential is more of a loftier thing from that. We want to make sure kids reach their highest potential versus a policy that is much more regulated in code that says students need to be able to meet these academic standards. And there are multiple ways in which they can meet those standards, but they have to meet those standards.
then to achieve these academic standards instead of highest level possible. That's what's,
Okay,
If you wanted to, you could even take the highlighted section out here, and the sentence could just read, the board recognized the importance of developing, assessing, and expanding academic standards to challenge students. Or recognizes the importance of developing, assessing, and expanding challenging academic standards, or something like that. Because the next sentence sort of says what that means. To this end, the district shall implement rigorous academic standards.
okay,
I'm sorry, I can't repeat that. I didn't follow what you were saying.
I think the sentence you see the section of the sentence that's highlighted here. I almost think that language could come out to it if you wanted to, if you were trying to tighten this up.
Okay, the last phrase in that first sentence.
That makes sense.
That essentially the goal is to challenge students, whatever the outcome that follows. I don't want to say it's not relevant, but really the purpose of this policy, right, is to say that the board is developing academic standards that are designed to challenge students.
then that's what we say, that are designed to challenge students.
Right, and so the sentence, if we did that, would look like this.
Academic standards in accordance with and may expand upon these adopted by the State Board of Education How's that sound?
I do like that, designed to challenge students.
Okay.
Do you like that?
All right, sounds good.
Everybody good with that edit?
Yeah,
What's that? You're batting the thousand.
Yeah.
Home run. All right.
Now if I took that.
Let me try. If I can jump in and try to see if I can hit a home run, but probably not. Under academic standards, it states that the term academic standards shall be deemed to encompass Pennsylvania core standards, state academic standards, and local academic standards. And my note I wrote, how about national standards or industry standards? To what extent are standards for AP, International Baccalaureate, and the NOCTI part of that? Or is it enough that when we say encompass Pennsylvania core standards, that people are going to know that it speaks to those? But when we separate it by a comma and say state academic standards and local, it makes me want to put more commas and say, there are some standards that are recognized by NOCTI, but they may not be reflected in the core curriculum.
Mhm.
Because the students are taking those courses in another location.
So you just have it state and national academic standards and take out the local academic standards, because what is a local?
I thought that the
academic standard?
Pennsylvania core standards could speak to the local, so we didn't need to necessarily have the local.
Got it.
Yeah,
But do we not, we have requirements that go beyond the Pennsylvania core standards and.
Yes, because it says that, and because the purpose says may expand upon those adopted by the State Board of Education.
should state be a capital letter?
I think if you asked a
It's specific. to
lot of
this-
different people, you'd get a lot of different answers. In a lot of the PDE guidance, usually it is capitalized. I'm just looking here to see. So the definition of Pennsylvania core standards here is academic standards for English language arts and math based upon a nationwide state-led process coordinated by the National Governors Association.
Yeah, it may not be necessary. I just wrote,
Mhm.
what about national standards and industry standards like the NOCTI?
So I definitely think the standards that are like the NOCTI standards, that is probably relevant to the district's policy on career and tech,
Yeah,
which is probably coming up, we'll get to that soon enough. And I
Okay.
think that's a good point, Dr. Marche, that probably should be incorporated into that policy. I don't know enough, and I could look into it, but I don't know enough about the ins and outs of national standards and the implications of that. I probably would need help from the directors in teaching and learning to share the significance of those statements. But we could have them take a look at this before either the board meeting or before the next policy committee meeting and see if they recommend any changes. That would not be an issue at all.
Okay,
The one thing that really struck me when I read it initially, I had the same question about like, what's the real purpose? And is it the compliance side of it? But that new statement that we added to it about the district shall assess individual student achievement, I think this one is really important for for all board members, but for the Ed Affairs Committee too, when we think about the work of the Ed Affairs Committee and what we're responsible to do as a board, gotta make sure that we do, but we're talking about how are our students doing in terms of achievement. And then the equity side of that, of providing support as necessary to help our students achieve. So I really like adding that statement a lot because I think it just really calls out the responsibility of the board to be monitoring, that through the work of the board and that committee in particular. To me, that's the most important thing about it. I didn't have any other questions though. So can we sum up what we just said we were going to do this? So at the end of the day, we're getting some feedback from the teaching and learning.
To see the extent in which those national standards impact the academic standards language.
Yeah. Whether it needs any revisions or
Yeah.
Okay.
Add to the
And
list of
then,
work.
and then can I just ask, would you mind just, so it's the change to the purpose that we talked about, is that right? We're tweaking that.
Yeah, I thought we did make some
Yes.
changes.
Can you just, I'm sorry, will you just, Ed, would you mind
Read
just
that again?
reading that
Show
again?
Yes, it says the board recognizes the importance of developing, assessing, and expanding academic standards to challenge students.
Okay,
And then
So
the
just-
second sentence says, to this end, the district shall implement rigorous academic standards in accordance with and may expand upon those adopted by the State Board of Education.
got it, okay, thank you.
I know it's splitting hairs, but I thought we said, academic standards designed to challenge students. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. So in that first line, academic standards designed to challenge students.
Yeah, let me do that now.
Thank you.
Perfect. All right, are we ready to go on to the next item?
Yes.
Yes, please.
All right, so I think is the next item the 137 policies?
Education
Yeah.
programs, yes.
Okay, so last year, the state law changed pretty significantly regarding home education programs, and home educated students have new expanded rights to participate in district extracurricular, curricular, and career and technical education programs. And in fact, under the new law, home educated students are actually allowed to come in to the district for up to 25% of their day and take part of their day in the district and then take part of their studies through a home education program. So the PSBA had template policies that sort of track the new law, and they're actually pretty good. So what we're going to see here is you see a policy and administrative regulation 137. That's just your traditional home education policy. That's the policy that outlines that when you want to homeschool your child, you have to submit an initial affidavit to the district. It outlines what the requirements are in terms of the qualifications of the person conducting the program. It talks about the courses that are required to be taught. It talks about the number of instructional hours that are required, the folder of materials that the home education supervisor is supposed to be keeping, what you can do if you need access to curricular materials from the school district, and then sort of what the district's oversight responsibility is to periodically monitor those home education programs to make sure that they're actually being carried out the way that they were represented to be in that initial affidavit. So nothing has really changed around home education programs generally. So what we did was we have a very simple policy here that just essentially says that home education programs should be carried out in accordance with the law, and that the superintendent should develop regulations in terms of what that looks like on a day in and day out basis. If you go to the AR here, all of these headings talk about what you need to do if you want to have your child enrolled in a home education program. So the affidavit on the front end, the required number of days and number of hours, the courses that you need to take. It's all outlined here. And this is all in accordance with section 1327.1 of the school code. Not really a whole lot of discretionary language, or there's not really a lot to be done by the board to make choices, because the rights of home educated students are sort of outlined in code. They're not local decisions. But then what you'll see here is a policy 137.1, 137.2, and 137.3, and they address, those three policies address the new aspects of the home education law: access to extracurricular programs, access to co-curricular and academic courses, and then number 3, participation in career and technical education. So it's a whole home education package here, but what prompted the need to bring this under review was the changes to the law that actually went into effect for the current school year, that gives home educated students those additional rights that I mentioned to access district programming. Sorry for that long introduction.
So we'll start with, any questions or comments on the policy 137 or the AR?
No, my understanding is that it's pretty prescribed for us, correct? No.
Yeah.
I was actually just out of curiosity. So on page 3, when it addresses students with disabilities, so am I to understand that if in order for it to be so these services are provided in district, correct? The students would have to come in for those.
Yeah, so as a general matter, the district does not owe services to a home educated student under federal special education law, because one of the things that has to be outlined in that initial affidavit that a home education supervisor would fill out is how you're going to meet the student's unique needs. The school district is always allowed to provide those services, but many districts, their practice is not to provide IEP or IDEA services to home educated students. Now, that said, I think in part that's what generated this new law that came into effect last year. Students are able to come into the district and enroll in courses up to 25% of their day. And so if a student comes in and says, I want to elect the learning support, part of my day, I want to take, I'm going to have reading support or learning support, or they select, those types of courses, then that becomes an issue that the special education folks need to work out and figure out what that looks like. And practically speaking, what happens, or in those cases, and these cases aren't like very common where home educated students come into the district. Many times there might be a reason why the family wants to home educate their child. But what would happen is when a student would come in and say, I want to come in for part of the day, and they're a special education student, it gives the district an opportunity to say, well, if you came here full time, this is what your IEP would look like. Most of the time, the families would say, well, that's not what we're looking for. We're just looking to take advantage of, 25% of our day. And then the district at that point in time would figure out, based on what selections the family made, how it would provide access to the student. So if the student had a physical disability, how would you ensure proper access to the program? If there was some sort of learning disability or emotional disability, the school district would certainly have to accommodate those needs when welcoming that student into your building. Did that address your question, Ms. DeLay?
Yeah, I mean, it was just a general, I was just curious to know. That did, thank you.
The one piece that I'm struggling a little bit, and it's not just what the state requirement is, it doesn't seem like the requirements at the secondary level actually track consistently with what we're required. Aren't we required to have minimum there's a certain number of credits in a world language
So.
by the state, or is that just a?
The district and the state are different.
Yeah.
I believe it's 22.5 credits. Wallingford-Swarthmore is a little bit different. It's a little bit more. I think it's 29. Yeah.
And
The
but
state minimum is 22.5.
does the
22.
state require any of those to be in a world language?
So it's interesting. So obviously that's become the norm for us, right?
Yeah.
We say if a student wants to attend a college, we're going to
Right.
get 3 years of consecutive
Yeah.
language, but that's not actually not a state
Not a
requirement.
right. That jumped out at me that it wasn't required, and I was, no.
It's become so normalized in a lot of districts, right? Because
Right.
kids going to post-secondary study, right? And the post-secondary institution said they need to study a language. But it is not I don't believe at this point, I'll
I
check.
was
off the
Googling, I
system.
couldn't find it,
Yeah, I don't
that's
think it
our requirement to offer it, but not that you had to have actual, credits in that,
Yeah.
so, interesting, okay. Okay, then do we want to move to the, 137.1 and start to go through those?
Yes, so the district had an existing policy 137.1, which we're getting rid of and replacing it with the with an updated template that talks about the new requirements of the law. So in other words, in order for students that are in home education programs to participate in extracurricular programs offered by the district, they do have to meet the same requirements that students would have to meet. You know, you have to be a resident of the district. If there's eligibility criteria or there's tryouts, home educated students have to meet those criteria, participate in those tryouts, things like that, just like other district students do. They don't get to necessarily displace district students from those slots. They have to submit any type of medical paperwork or physical paperwork that you would have to do. So all of the requirements that are in place for district students essentially get imposed on home educated students that want to participate in those activities. And the district does not necessarily transport from a home education program to a district school. The parents or some other adult would be responsible for getting the child to and from those activities, unless, of course, transportation was available at the time that the student needed transportation and there was room, on the vehicle. So that's what 137.1 does. And we're just talking about extracurriculars. We're not in 137.1 talking about access to district courses or anything like that just yet. That's in the next policy.
Is it my understanding that they have to carry their own insurance? So it's the parents' insurance policy that these homebound and students are?
So they may be, the district certainly has a student, the district has an insurance policy that covers students for certain injuries that take place in athletics during the time when that athletic or like the sport or athletic competition is in season. And my sense is that the policy probably covers any students who are participating, whether they're truly public education students or whether they're other students who are allowed by law to participate.
Maintain appropriate insurance coverage consistent with the coverage requirements for the district students.
So many times the district's policy covers a certain minimum amount of coverage. And again, that coverage is usually limited to the time when the sport is in season, when they're actively participating. Families have the opportunity to purchase additional insurance, and they can choose to do that or not do that. And the same is true for home educated students.
Oh,
So
so
there's no additional cost to the district from an insurance standpoint to enable these students to participate.
okay.
It's a good question, though.
Do you have any other questions? Not doing any other questions? Okay.
137.2 is the next policy. This policy addresses the co-curricular activities and then also the district academic courses. And really the hallmark to the change in the law is this section here under academic courses that allows students a statutory right to come into the district's buildings and participating in up to 25% of their school day in district. Now there has to be space in the classes and things like that. And they have to, again, comply with all of the other requirements that other students, if there's prerequisites, for example, they have to comply with those prerequisites. So you're not giving home educated students anything more than your public education students have, other than the opportunity to access the programming for a part of the day.
I have a question about the academic courses. And I know that at the end of the day, there was always provision for students to participate in co-curricular programming.
Yep.
I'm just curious, so that if a student was homeschooled and they wanted to be part of
the band, the marching band, right?
part of the chess club, or they wanted to be part of an athletic team, they're able to participate.
Correct. But they would have to also take the academic piece of that course. So for example, if participation in band require, in the marching band, for example, requires you during the day, period 4, to take a band class. And then after school and on the weekends, you might have marching band activities. That's sort of a co-curricular activity. There's a classroom component and then an out-of-school component. That would be different than, for example, playing baseball, where there's no classroom component. It's just an extracurricular activity under the umbrella of athletics. But if you have a home educated student and they want to, for example, participate in the marching band, and there's a classroom component, they do have to take the classroom component as well.
Okay. Which this new law provides, I'm sorry. So this new law would make that provision available compared to before it was not.
The only way that the way that it would have been possible in the past is if the district voluntarily allowed a home education student to dual enroll in the district. And sometimes districts would do that, where a home education student would say, hey, I want to come into your building because I want to take Mandarin, and I don't have the ability to take Mandarin in the home education program. You could permit that student to dual enroll, but not all districts allowed students to dual enroll. And I think that's from an advocacy standpoint, I think the folks that represent home education constituencies pressured the legislature enough to say this shouldn't just be a local decision. These students should have the right to do this. And so now what was discretionary before is now permitted as a statutory entitlement.
You had a question?
Yeah, but all in all, it says that if space is available, so the parent could wish for their child to participate, but if there was no space available, if it was 27 student capacity and that homebound would be 28, then they wouldn't be eligible to take the course in their 25% day. Am I understanding that correctly?
So the law basically says that essentially, and it's here at the end in the delegation of responsibility in these final couple paragraphs, that the district doesn't have to open new spaces or anything like that. And you can prioritize, if there are limited spaces and more individuals, whether they're traditional public school students or home educated students that want to participate, the district is allowed to create prioritization standards, and they can be based on all of these things that are listed here: academic achievement, demonstration of competencies, record of conduct. Home education students have to have an equal opportunity to participate and to compete for those spaces, but this law doesn't require you to open up new sections or to hire additional staff to accommodate students that are in home education programs. So it's not that, well, we take care of all of the district students first, and then only if there's space left over do we allow the home educated students. It's if there's space, then everybody can be accommodated. If there's not enough space, then the district's allowed to have other criteria to figure out who gets the priority spots. And it can't just be that, well, district students get priority and home educated students don't. It has to be based on some other factor, whether that be academic achievement, conduct, and time will, I think time will tell. Many districts haven't really thought through how they would prioritize, because the numbers, in terms of the numbers of kids who are electing to come in for up to 25% of the day, the numbers are very low. I'm not sure how many you have in Wallingford, but my experience with other clients is that the numbers are pretty low. We're not talking about, 50 students. We're not talking probably even half of that number.
We have 24 total.
Home educated students.
Based on
And are they, like, what level?
the average number is around 20. And they are, they vary. They start as early as age 6. To one who's 8 years old, then we categorize them by age. So, 2 students who are 9 years old, we have 4 who are 10, 2 who are 11, 1 who's 12, 3 who are 13, 2 who's 15, 3 that are 16, 2 that are 17. So in total, that's 21 students.
And Dr. Marseille, have those students elected to come to the district for part of their day, or is that just your total number of students that are in home ed programs?
Oh, I'm sorry. I only asked the total number who are in the program.
Yep. My guess is that only a fraction of those students, maybe less than 20, you might have 4 or 5 students who have elected to come for part of their day.
If a student is homebound and they, through 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, they've done 25% of their courses here, how does that affect their diploma? Because it says that we don't give a diploma to homeward bound, so would we give a certificate of completion?
So there's a mechanism through the Department of Education that home educated students get their own diploma. But to Ms. Walkman's point earlier, the standards are different. And so that's why many public schools don't award a diploma, because the way in which you assess it, it's really an entirely different, it could be an entirely different type of education. So they would still be eligible for the diploma through the Department of Education. And those diplomas carry the same weight and authority as, a diploma issued by a public school district. They just don't get issued by the public school district. They get issued at the state level.
But I'm thinking, like, say a student that wants to go to school for engineering,
Right.
and so taken as part of their 25 percentile, they've taken the math courses that Wallingford says you need to enter into a post-high school academia.
Mhm.
That's what I'm saying. Would they get some type of, for their transcript purposes, that they took?
Oh, I see what you're saying. There would be some level of documentation that those courses were taken at Wallingford-Swarthmore. And the district would have a record, of that attendance, and the student would be evaluated just like all other students. So there would be a record that the student, because they enroll in the district, they become dual enrolled students, and there would be a record of that. Yes.
But I would think, Mr. Diazio, that we would never be called on to provide a transcript because it would be incomplete. It would only be that quarter of classes that they've taken. So we would report those grades or performance levels back to the home or their home education program. And
Okay,
then they would pull together what would ultimately be the transcript.
okay,
And this is home schooled, which is distinct from homebound instruction.
Yes. Yes. So home education is what many people know as homeschool, where you are being taught by a parent or another adult in the home. Homebound instruction is when a student, because of a medical condition, is temporarily confined to their home. And many times the district will provide a certain number of hours of support. And those are temporary. There's temporary arrangements, usually a month or two. It could be a student that has might be undergoing a cancer treatment or have some type of physical reason that they cannot come to school. And then there is something called instruction in the home, which is a highly specialized placement through special education for students that have to be educated in the home because of a severe disability. So those are the different. So you have home education, homebound instruction, and education in the home.
Any further questions then on the 137.2?
And then 137.3 is the ability of home educated students to participate in career and technical education. And as all of you know, that is coordinated through Delaware County, the Delaware County Technical High Schools. And same general framework, you have to meet all the other requirements to be eligible to participate at those schools. No transportation unless it's on an existing route at the same time that the student needs to be transported. And students have to comply with all of the rules and the regulations of the technical high school.
Any questions on
Mr. Diazio, how many families do you know, or maybe you can guesstimate, who participate in homeschool and are part of a technical school? Because it seems like it's the antithesis of the homeschool process. Or does the technical school apply the same way with the traditional public school with respects to them being able to take a certain amount of credits in that school versus being in the nursing program? Because if you're in the nursing program, it's a extremely competitive and intense program. Engineering program, like the young lady doing 8th grade orientation, when we sat there and she talked about the program she was in, she was amazing. Should have brought Cheyenne, I would have nudged her and said, you heard that? But is that difficult to do? Or I'm sure people do it, but it just seems to me very challenging to be homeschooled and be part of a technical school.
I would say that it's not very common. I mean, when you think about another way to think about it is, even if you just take your regular district enrolled student population and think about, okay, well, what percentage of high schoolers take career and technical education? And maybe that number is, I don't even know. I wouldn't even know a good number to guess, but maybe 10%, or maybe even a little bit less, 7%, something like that. And now you take your population of home educated students of 20, and you apply that same percentage. We might be talking about one student, maybe two students. And I think in general, I think your observation is probably correct. I think home educated students in general probably participate in career and technical education at lower levels to begin with. So it's not very common. Like I said, if this impacted one student per year, that might be a lot. At the same time, career and technical education has been growing, right? And I think that there is a recognition that maybe more home educated students would like to participate in this type of educational opportunity. And again, I think you saw the legislature respond by saying, whether you're in a public school district or whether you're in a home educated program or any other type of setting, you should have access to that type of education. And I think that's the public policy basis behind the law. So who knows, you might see a little bit of an increase in the future, but I think I agree that, historically, I think the numbers are low.
Any further questions on this one? All right.
Again, that takes us to our public comments section of the night. And so seeing that there are no public comments, we can move on to the final presentation of discussion of policies for the.
Yeah, so we have two policies here, 142 and 143, that in reviewing the policy manual, we felt that those could be repealed. We could start with I'll talk about them both and then ask if there's any questions. But the migrant students policy on 142, there was language when No Child Left Behind was originally passed, like I guess we're almost 25 years from that now. That states were required to have a program to address the needs and to provide appropriate services to migrant students. It's not necessarily incumbent upon each school district to have a program of migrant education. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has guidelines that are followed by all school districts within the Commonwealth if students are, qualify as migrant students. So it's the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania that's to have the program and the policy, and they do. There's not really, in my mind, there's no need for a local policy. Similarly, in policy 143, there was an obscure provision of No Child Left Behind that contained this unsafe school choice option. And schools that were designated as persistently dangerous, when a child attended a school that was deemed persistently dangerous, they had certain rights to sort of transfer out of those schools. The Commonwealth for years has not designated any schools as persistently dangerous. And in fact, I think the only schools, other than the first year or two, the only schools statewide that were ever designated as persistently dangerous, there were a couple in Philadelphia in a couple years. And I think it's been almost 10 years since there's been any schools that have been designated. So again, there's state language on what would happen if a school was deemed persistently dangerous. Wallingford's schools don't come anywhere close, obviously, to fitting within that category. And so we're recommending that policy for repeal as well.
Right. So when I had a question on 142, just to, so I think I understand what you were expressing there, Mr. Diageo, but to the extent, so if we had a student who was qualified as a migrant student,
Yes.
What happens? Like, what do they stay with us? Do they have some, I don't, that's what I'm missing in that context of what you were explaining.
Yeah, it's the place, Dr. Connolly may be more familiar with it. The place I have always known in Kennet,
Right.
because of the mushrooms, and the farmers there, but there is, so PDE has guidelines here on what migrant education looks like. It's not that they leave, so they remain your students, but the issue is, those are children who are usually very transient.
Sure.
And so almost like, the requirements that you have under, like if you have Title I schools to engage with families and to have information nights and to provide additional levels of support to enable them to participate in school activities. The same type of system is set up for migrant students. Admittedly, I've never had to deal with it. And like I said, the only place that I'm ever familiar with that has had to address it is in Kennet. So I could come back and provide some additional information about what that exactly looks like. But I'm not entirely sure right
Yeah.
off.
The same thing. We're the only state in the nation to have state funding for migrant education. Interesting, which is, I guess, because of the farms, right? A lot of farms. Okay, yeah, I was just curious that, so it doesn't impact, by not having it, we do not run the risk of not providing something to our students that we would otherwise be required to provide.
Absolutely not. Correct. That's right.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else have questions then about, I've heard, and now I've lost my train of thought here, so I'm not sure if we asked on 142 or 143, any questions about repealing those? None?
No, they can kick it to the can.
I cannot believe that nobody's designated, leaders.
Yeah, well,
All right, very good. All right, thank you. And we'll go to the agenda as well. Again, this will be our last opportunity for public comments, but seeing and hearing none, I will announce that the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, April 10th. Same place, same time. Look forward to seeing everybody then. And we can adjourn the meeting. Great, it is 8:07 p.m.
Thank you.